Hey Josh, thanks for doing a video with me.
My pleasure as always.
Thank you. So really interesting topic because there might be more science in it than at first expected. So I'm going to call this video something along the lines of morning prayers save from heart attacks. So this whole discussion happened because I messaged you about 3 o'clock in the morning. And he was like, and I said, why you? And I explained the reason why. I mean, you expressed surprise. We messaged each other. We're good friends. And I said, oh, it's because I do morning prayers. And you were like, oh, I feel sorry for you, something along those lines.
I'm so sorry that that's a reality being forced onto you.
Yes.
I didn't express it like that though. But I'm sorry that that's the case.
And I said, so I'm gonna. This is effectively the response, and I'm gonna just so people do say you've got a very mathematical style, which is. Then I'm going to express the mathematical style so you know what's happening. I'm going to break it down as to the 3 benefits of the morning prayers. One is happiness, one is health, and one is success. And I'm going to start off, as I'm a Muslim, and what I do here is I do happiness classes based on Islamic principles that anybody can benefit from, even if they're not Muslim. And so to demonstrate that it is Islam, I just quote bits of the Quran which are relevant to parts of the discussion. And so the small quote is, "It is in the remembrance of God that hearts can find comfort." Quran chapter 13 verse 29. And I might put a link to the verse of the Quran if people are interested in the description of the video. And so, happiness. Okay, so it's really important to start your day off with gratitude. And that's what is a fundamental part of the prayer. And it's really positive, and it's going to feed into the health thing. But it's a gratitude process. It's a good way to start the day. It's part of, like, you've allotted, this is what I'm going to do every morning at the start of my day. How do you feel about that?
Well, denying people opportunity for a prolonged sleep is damaging to their health. We all must have a substantial amount of sleep and a solid amount of sleep, and denying a human being the comfort of such an act is dangerous for not only for your body but dangerous for your mental health, because when we have a lack of sleep or fear that we may miss something important during our sleep cycle and have to wake up to engage in that, anxiety, distress, health is affected, and then resulting in a community which is constantly at anxiety. And because that community has accepted such a low standard of health and mental health, it normalizes making other people commit equally, and if not worse, acts under the claim, if you're not this, then you're not close to God.
Okay, thank you. You actually reminded me of the first message, the first way I responded to what you said was this gratitude process is the reason why Muslims have the best mental health and why atheists have rising levels of depression, which is a reality. The gratitude process is a great way of starting the day, and I call it the God perspective. It gives you the greater perspective as to why we're here, makes you think about why we're here, and that perspective is known amongst psychologists to be good for your health. So Viktor Frankl talks about you need meaning in your life to be happy. It's essential. It's the ultimate thing you need to be happy. You need meaning in your life. And he said that God is the super meaning, because it's very hard to derive meaning outside that. Okay, you might think you'd be able to derive your own meaning when you think everything is random, but it's not actually possible. It's kind of it's a contradiction to say
and nobody thinks everything's random. Nobody thinks so.
A lot of people do. If you're an atheist, you necessarily have to believe things are random and have no meaning. Simply, that means you're a nihilist.
Thinks that people have made this world the way it is, as in the political sense. So the Muslim political, Abrahamic religions, Jewish or Christian, they politically design every single act that is done underneath these banners of God as ways of, if you don't do it like this, then you are a sinner and you have to divert it from the common standard of what it is to be a human being. And that variant and those variants, which turns out to be the majority and not a variant, is absolutely horrendously damaging for those who don't conform to that nationalistic dictatorship which you think is the way to govern a human being, and there is no happiness in that.
Okay, so as I was saying, we can look at the proof is in the pudding, as it were. And if you look at the Islamic way of life versus the atheist way of life, the atheists are dying out very quickly. Literally, this is a statistical fact. If you look at the West, if you look at the Muslims they have 5% of the population, and they have 10% of the children. Everybody else is rapidly dying out. This is well known. There's a population implosion. So what you're saying about mental health is not in line with reality. But I wanted to statistical reality, ONS data, and everything.
Back up your argument. That's how you treat science.
Sure. Anyway, and then I wanted to talk about the kind of thing I basically introduced about how morning prayers help save from heart attacks. It's very interesting that when you wake up, you have high cortisol levels, these stress hormones, right? Okay, and you need to be able to combat that when you wake up. And so if you've got high happiness levels, if you worked on your gratefulness, that's going to reduce that. And so there's a very interesting fact that most heart attacks happen in the morning. So it makes sense to work on your happiness levels to combat the high stress levels that we naturally wake up with. And then on top of that, the Islamic form of worship is in line with what we call the circadian rhythm, which is your natural sleep cycle according to sunlight levels. So we naturally wake up early. This is I researched it, and it's kind of common knowledge in a way. We naturally wake up early when there's more sunlight. So it's in line with that. And so why is that important? It's because we naturally get ourselves really busy. We wake up early, we start working and get involved in the stressful things in life. And so it's before we start getting stuck into these things that cause us stress, it's better to have a gratefulness process, a gratitude process, and a God perspective that will protect us from the negative effects of getting stuck in the work stressful
life of capitalism that built on Abrahamic religions has given us and forced us into.
Sure. But, so I suppose so if I was summarizing, people are unaware of how much heart attacks happen in the morning, and it's a very good idea before we start getting stuck into that, the morning prayers before sunrise, and before we can get stuck into this negative cycle and combat it. So I suppose I'm repeating things, but just clarifying it there.
But I think you demonstrate a complete contradiction over what you've made the claim to, because your weight level is not ideal, you're out of shape. You therefore haven't been adhering to this Muslim I'm not going to use the word rhetoric, this Muslim process that you have just described. You are literally the embodiment of somebody that doesn't do that. My health is strong, solid, not overweight, and I can run X amount of distance if I was mental enough to run X amount of distance. And yet, I don't need a God to be healthy. And even with a God, you are not healthy. But just to go back to that rather gross statement you made just a moment ago, atheists are dying out. Before all the Abrahamic religions were invented, there was no Abrahamic religions. They were just people living life, worshipping maybe the sun at best, and getting on with things. So people were existing before Abrahamic religions ever existed, and did amazingly well doing that. And my last point, if I haven't forgotten it, is that health is beautiful, but we need to live in a society that isn't a dictatorship dictating to you how to live that, to be that health with and it clearly hasn't worked for you. Oi, it's recording us.
We weren't secret recording,
Yeah,
don't worry.
hippie, get out of here.
You can come round this side, you can see it's recording. Anyway, go on.
So even with a God, it hasn't helped you, and clearly you're the proof that of failure.
I thought the camera is the other side.
Yeah, sure.
Everybody
We're
thinks
just
so.
going to finish this video. So, as I say, the statistics show otherwise. Depression levels amongst the atheists are increasing as religion, generally speaking, is in decline in the West. Depression is going up, and this is well known amongst psychologists. It's actually
It's only well known amongst the very selective psychologists that you have chosen.
sure, of course,
As-
whatever you want to believe. And
No, you select,
then can I finish what I was
you
saying?
select the evidence to suit you.
As I was saying, this is well known. Like if you want to do your own research, of course, Viktor Frankl, he says you need meaning to be happy, and you cannot create meaning by itself. And if you are an atheist, you're necessarily nihilistic, which means there is no meaning. So it's anti-happiness,
That's not true.
which is why the most common way that young Westerners die, or male Westerners die, is
No.
suicide. It's not sick, right? So it's the most common. So suicide has become the most common way for young Westerners to die, and so that's just rounding off that. And even being grateful is actually impossible for atheists. So you cannot be grateful if you think there is no pattern in life, everything is random, and it's actually very difficult to be grateful to nothing if you don't believe there's a God. So the whole gratefulness process doesn't really work. Go on, come on.
Okay, look. So until recently,
Can I just quickly finish off? This is why when atheists have an argument against God, they keep saying things like, "Oh, the world is terrible," it's just not worth living. And Muslims, on the other hand, especially, are famous for saying Alhamdulillah, and thank you for God, thank God for so many things. They're always grateful and excited about life. Whereas if you hear atheists always depressed and telling you how the world is
in your
terrible.
mind, that's your personal interpretation. I've never argued against God. Oi,
Everybody's suspicious. Why? No.
I've never argued against God. That's why I'm agnostic. You design God to your own personal benefit of life, material benefit. Suicide rates are high because we live in an Abrahamic capitalist society at the moment, which means that anybody that dare to be a human being, dare to be themselves, whether you be straight, gay, transgender, Muslim, Jewish, you are instantly condemned unless you're in the right country at the right time with the right dictatorship, which is what Khalid believes is the only solution to happiness, is somebody with a big stick hitting you into happiness, which is what the actual bedrock of a dictatorship is, of course, because having free will means having choice about the actions that you do as a person, and having choice means you take responsibility for your life, and if you take responsibility, you means that you can start having proper sleep and power over entities and other things out there which are denying you a fair wage, denying you a national health service, denying you an education and a good night's sleep, just like his particular brand of religious interpretation is. Happy to take on the misery because he believes that the more you are miserable, the closer you are to your divine entity, where the more happy you are, the more well-rounded you are, it means you can embrace your spirituality. And happiness comes from free education, free healthcare, and a community which is firmly rooted in a democracy. And suicides come from suicides. Remember, Muslim communities, Christian communities, they can give a shit about suicides. The only reason that we have statistics like rape, paedophilia, and suicides now is because we've had in a community where a National Health Service could actually even dare to write down that there is such a thing. Otherwise, in his reality and other ABM religions, your murder and death and suicide is just ignored. Absolutely not at best, and at worst, your whole family is condemned because you did a terrible, sad, tragic act.
So, I mean, he made up a lot of facts that nobody believes in.
Right!
Can we just? Yeah, it is true.
Because I
It's
didn't
true.
quote Bob, my random,
So let me-
psychologist.
So,
It makes it not true.
yeah, I mean, you could do. Viktor Frankl does exist. He's very famous,
Yeah,
very
Lord
famous
knows it,
psychologist. Can I speak? So, I mean, you made a lot of claims that nobody believes. Like, for example, we're living in a sort of an Abrahamic country
Hell.
called England.
Abrahamic hell.
As if like we're following like Sharia law and all these kind of things. That's clearly not true.
No.
And then the second thing is you said is kind of capitalism, like Abrahamic capitalism. Abrahamic capitalism is a non-interest based capitalism, so that's obviously not applied here. And if it was, then people wouldn't be forced to pay ridiculous amounts of interest back, so it would be a better world if we didn't have that. And also, it's good that you mentioned that this being forced into all these things, but the Quran says there's no compulsion in matters of religion. So that's just clearing up all those things that you just said that were completely untrue. But the last point I wanted to make was, as I was saying, there's three elements to the benefits of morning prayers in Islam. The first I said was happiness, the second was the health that I demonstrated, and then there's a success element. So I'm a big fan of entrepreneurs. And there's a great book called The 5 O'Clock Club by Robin Sharma. He's not a Muslim. And he has a thing called the Power Hour. And he said there are three elements to that if you want to be really successful. And it's like 25 million people bought his book. There must be some truth in it, hopefully. And I think there's some wisdom in what he says. He says in the Power Hour, you should do three things: move, reflect, and learn. Okay? And these are incorporated in what Muslims often do in the morning. So, first of all, reflect. Prayer is about reflecting. It's being thankful about the world we live in, the position, God is the greatest, reminding yourself that we shouldn't be overwhelmed by our ego. We should, all sorts of reflection about why we're here. It's really healthy, right? That's one of the things he said you should do. So you start off the day well. And he says move. He includes in that movement he includes doing things like yoga, and which is actually Muslim prayer has all sorts of yoga moves. There's a lot of
Christians love their yoga.
yeah. Okay. So there's 2 boxes ticked in according to what he says is really helpful. And then he says learn. So you're often, besides reflecting, I read the Quran straight after morning prayers with my family, and we learn something about that, like the meaning of life and how to live our lives better. So we tick all those 3 boxes, and according to him, that's a very successful strategy. And not just according to him, there's a lot of statistics that say that if you're a CEO, you're far more likely to wake up before 6 o'clock in the morning than other people. So successful people wake up early. You might have heard of the phrase, the early bird gets the worm. People who have a successful attitude, they're very happy to wake up early. And just that regimen, the self-imposed regimen, people like Jordan Peterson always talk about having some order in your life. Okay?
Says that Jordan Peterson was a major drug addict. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, sure. So that's
And so
because of
bullshit that he said.
So yeah, I would say his limitation is that
His reality is his limitation.
His limitation is that he always says things like, I act as if God exists. He doesn't truly believe God exists, and that's his limitation. And that's why I think,
He's a
unfortunately,
bullshitter. That's his limitation.
that's the cause of his depression. There's one gap, and it is quite commonly known that if you do believe in God, even there's a great video on Big Think that says that if you believe in God, you're an atheist talking about it. He said, do check this out. The benefit of believing in God is that you're far less likely to be depressed because you believe there's somebody who's taking care of you, and it's not all random. It's not a cold world that we're living in. So anyway, you have the last word.
So I think you're confusing a dictatorship with God. That's clearly how you're. The way you justify a dictatorship is because you say, look, it's okay having this horrific system because this horrific system is built around the concept of a God. Therefore, I will allow this lack of humanity to penetrate and percolate through all my community and societies. And I will know that as long as I keep pure to this concept of what actions get me closer to God, waking up at ridiculous hours, and then having to go back to sleep again and destroy sleep, I will justify my place to getting into heaven, which is complete misnomer. There are a lot of CEOs. Let's just cover that quickly. The world we live in is owned by these CEOs, his idea of capitalism. And this world that we live in, this capitalist world of what he thinks is people waking up early and succeeding, what they're succeeding at exactly. They're succeeding at of creating more pollution, more weapons so that Muslims and Christians can murder each other. That's what they're succeeding at making more cars with oil, petrol engines. That means that every breath you and your child takes are being punished for breathing with the pollution and particulates. That's Khalid's idea of success. It's creating a world so miserable and so redundant of humanity that we're only left with one solution, and a desperate solution that is indeed that I must believe in some radical fanatical concept for me to get to heaven and leave all this all this hell that I've helped you as in not I, you have contributed to help into. CEOs should never be allowed to pollute our environment just because they're doing it under the umbrella of an Abrahamic religion. I've almost finished. So they must never allow to do that. They should be absolutely, anyone of that doesn't get enough sleep, to go back to the original subject, does increase psychopathic behavior, and this is the last people you ever want in charge of your company, your life, your family. The psychopaths will always murder you and your family and your community and your happiness. They will say they care for your happiness, but what really they're saying is, I only care about my route and golden ticket to get into whatever heaven I've chosen to be real.
Cool. And do you speak English?
No.
Oh, okay, Arabic only. Houthi. Oh, okay. Do you know Salat? What that is?
كيف speak Arabic?
Arabic?
إيه
مو عربي؟
عربية.
Okay.
Can we conclude? And
yeah,
then
we'll
you two can
conclude.
have
Sorry, I thought he was interested. I thought he might have
Conclude.
something into
Yeah, I need to shoot
yeah.
off.
So anyway, there's loads and loads of benefits of being morning prayer that I haven't even listed, like all the getting together and things like that. 5 times a day is very social. Getting the family together, getting Muslims pray in the local mosque, which is a community center, and all of that is missing in Western societies. There's so many things that I could have added, but anyway, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Everything he said, you can do without a God.
But it doesn't happen without a God. That's
If you're
interesting.
lazy.
Yeah.
Look at the belly. That's demonstration that even with a God, his belly is proving.
Somewhere down there, there's
His
a belly.
belly is proving that even with a God, it's still not helping him.
Would you like to say anything? You can. Okay.
Thank you
There
very
are
much,
lots of
Khaled. That
Do you want to
was
say
wonderful. The dust
anything?
is now
No.
settled.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time.